Okay, well, we are discussing what are the contributions of the Rasta movement to the ongoing cause of African liberation. Rastafari has emerged as one of the most identifiable and highly visible movements of Jamaica and is seen as a mouthpiece of the African liberation struggle in the Caribbean. In fact, Jamaican professor of African American Studies and Political Science, Horace Campbell, identifies Rastafari as one of the most significant movers and shapers of Pan-African ideas, even more so than Pan-Africanism as an intellectual movement. In the words of one African Caribbean Pan-Africanist based in Guyana, Usi Kwayana, the power of art that Bob Marley's music represented had done more to popularize the real issues of African liberation than several decades of back-breaking work by Pan-Africanists and international revolutionaries. Notably, one of the most foundational contributions of Rastafari to the cause of African liberation has been the reassertion of the divinity of Africanness through the deification of an African monarch, His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie, the embrace of the idol or natural living, Livity, and the critiques of Babylon or Western civilization. According to Jamaican theologian Noel Leo Erskine, in From Garvey to Mali, Rastafari Theology, the whole Rastafarian theology boils down to this: God is an African, so that the central question the Rastas pose for us is, where do we stand in relation to Africa? A significant feature of Rastafari, therefore, has been to challenge the white God complex that has bedeviled so many peoples of African origin since the onset of Euro-American colonialism and the advent of Christianity in Africa. In addition, Rastafarians made significant ideological contributions to the African liberation struggle by building on Marcus Garvey's Back to Africa movement. The roots of Rastafari are traced back to the Ethiopianist movement and the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, established in 1914 in Jamaica by Marcus Mosiah Garvey. While Zionists preach the return of Jews to Palestine, Ethiopianists maintain that Africans in the diaspora should return to Africa, and particularly to the historical heart of Africa, Ethiopia. In the Caribbean, Rastafarians challenged neocolonialism and capitalism in diverse ways. Rastafarians in Jamaica were active in trade union and labour struggles to bring about increased rights and wages for African workers. Rastafarians were also involved and actively engaged in the Grenadian Revolution, as well as being part of the Black Power movement in Trinidad during the 1970s. On the continent, African liberation movements such as those in Zimbabwe used reggae music to raise the consciousness of the African masses, mobilize people towards emancipatory self-expression and action by incorporating the themes of African liberation into its lyrics. So that is our introduction, and of course we always have some guests to stimulate our thoughts on this topic. So our guests today will be Tony TAFARI Thomas and also Yasus Afari. Now, Tony TAFARI Thomas is a former founder and director of Hip Hop Generation UK and was identified by The Independent on Sunday as one of 10 young, gifted and black, quote unquote, in the field of politics. Thomas is the current chair of the Rastafari Council of Britain. Greetings to you.
Yes, greetings, Esther. Thanks for having me on the show again.
That's okay. Well, we've got a lot to cover. Very big show, important conversation. And we're going to begin, or attempt to begin, at one of the beginnings. Who is Rastafari?
Well, I'm wondering how you asked me that question. Rastafari is if you ask me about the man, it was a man called TAFARI who came to prominence in Ethiopia in the 1920s. And at the time of his coronation, which was in 1930, which basically instigated or started the rebirth of the Rasta movement, his name was Rastafari. Rasta as a movement, I would describe it as a new African lifestyle and cultural identity movement, which is rooted in the lived experience of the people of African descent in the Western world. And it's a political, intellectual, religious, humanistic and ecological movement that encompasses many facets of life and human experience. I mean, Rasta is a philosophy and what we refer to as a liberty. So this is a term that refers to a lived spirituality, and it is a philosophy that is in an ever state of becoming.
Okay, now you say a liberty. Just break that down for our listeners, because some people will be familiar with what it means, but others will not. So, tell us, what is a liberty?
Well, I would describe a liberty as spirituality in action. So a liberty is not so much about going to a particular institution or going to a church or a temple to pray or to meditate. It's about actually putting your spirituality or your values into action.
Okay. And what are the roots of Rasta?
Well, Rasta, as we know it in its modern interpretation, arose in the 1930s in response to the coronation of Tafari, who was crowned as Haile Selassie. But Rasta has some more deeper roots than that. The roots of Rasta can be found in the ancient civilizations of the Nile Valley in Africa. These civilizations included Nubia and the Great Egypt, or Kemet as we refer to it as. The civilization that built the pyramids developed writing, religious thought, philosophy, and the very concept of civilization itself. So in Kemet, the first religious and ethical texts were written that would go on to influence religious thought all over the world. So in 2050 BC, we get the first written definition of the sage in Africa in what is referred to as the Antef inscription. And the sage was referred to as the Seba, and this is a word rooted in the Greek, it is the root word of the Greek term sophis, which makes up the term philosopher. So the sage is referred to as he is the one whose heart is informed about the things which would be otherwise ignored, the one who is clear-sighted when he is deep into a problem, who penetrates ancient writings, who is sensible enough to unravel complications, who is really wise. The sage was often depicted seated, reading or writing a text with long locks of hair. Tutankhamun, probably the most well-known African king, was discovered with locks on his head, and the locks were seen as a commitment to a life of sagacity and of royalty. And there were also those in the tradition of the African sage that wore low hair, such as Imhotep, but locks were a definite symbol of wisdom. And these wise men and sages were the cultural architects of Kemet. In the book of Coming Forth by Day, there is an ode to a lord who is referred to as Lord Rasta. And Rasta was a term used to describe the way to the other world. So we have, so to speak, reinvented the term as a rebirth of this ancient tradition and this ancient culture.
Which goes back to Nile Valley civilizations and Kemet and so forth. Uh-huh. So how does the sort of whole connection, or is there one, I should ask first, with the whole Israelite? Because, we talk about, I also hear very commonly in terms of Rasta, this notion of being of the tribes of Israel. So how do you make that link also with Israelite heritage?
Well, I mean, within the Rasta faith, there are various different interpretations, and some organizations and some individuals have tried to make a connection between themselves and the tribe of Israel. My personal conception of Rasta is not rooted in those ideas. Basically, when I think about the Bible, I think about a story of a particular people that stem from a particular part of the world, what they call like the Levant region. So it's the area around like Palestine and the Middle East. And this is not the same lineage as we as African people. So in the Bible it talks about Ham, Shem and Japhet. So the Bible is actually a story of Shem. It is not a story of Ham. And we as African people, we would be referred to as the Hamitic people. So at the time when Israel were experiencing, according to the Bible, this is when they were experiencing slavery, the Hamitic people were basically lording over them, and they had a different set of ideas which the people of Israel disagreed with.
Okay.
So what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do, is to bring Rasta back into a more African context. And there is a strain of thought within Rasta that has been articulating this for a long time, but it just hasn't become as prominent as the types of ideas connected with Christianity or with Judaism. And in a sense, some Rastas may have been quite fearful to really step beyond the boundary of the Western monotheistic faiths. But I, as a Rasta, I'm not afraid to do that.
All right, I think we're probably going to explore that point a bit more, but I think we need to take a little break. Greetings, warm greetings. We are discussing what are the contributions of the Rasta movement to the ongoing cause of African liberation. And remember, we're talking about both spiritual and physical liberation. And so it's necessary to kind of get a bit of a foundation in terms of, you know, Rastafari and what it means, what it's all about, so that we can really engage in the wider topic, linking it to our ongoing liberation as African people. And we are speaking with Tony TAFARI Thomas, who is the chair of the Rastafari Council of Britain. Coming back to you, Tony. Now, it's interesting what you were saying before the break. You were making it very clear that there are different, if you like, what we'd call houses of Rasta, and there are some who link Rasta to an Israelite heritage, but you particularly want to return it to what you're saying is a more African idea, going back to Kemet and the Nile Valley. I mean, that's probably going to be quite a challenge, and I think it will help, you know, contextualize our conversation, really trying to explore what is Rasta, because if there are different houses, then I think it's important for our listeners to have a better understanding of what some of these distinctions are. So we'll probably might revisit that, and I'm sure some of our listeners would like to join in the conversation, but not yet. We want to hear a bit more from Tony first. So, okay, this question of African Zionism then, which again, many people would associate with some, you know, strands, if you like, or houses of Rasta, in particular those who identify with an Israelite heritage. Do you recognize Rasta as being a kind of African Zionism?
I would definitely say that. I think African Zionism would be a essential part of the Rasta philosophy.
And what is your understanding then of African Zionism, and how it's different or how it relates to Jewish Zionism, if at all?
Okay. Well, I would describe African Zionism as the folk philosophy of African descendants of slaves in the Western world. It's been a constant theme throughout our philosophies and throughout our music. We were taken away from Africa and we lost contact with Africa. We could not point to a place or a particular tribe that we came from or a language that we spoke, but we knew from oral stories that we had been taken from Africa and Africa was our home. So what we done is we developed an idealistic image of what Africa was or what Africa could be. It became, after decolonization, a vision for Africa that seemed more and more out of date, out of touch with the actual African reality, but it was a dream that could not die. And Rasta have been the ones who have kept the flame of hope for Africa burning. So African Zionism is fundamentally the return of the African diaspora to its land of milk and honey in Africa. African Zionism is a pan-African philosophy, and it is rooted in our ideas of a new pan-Africa, a new African civilization to astonish the world. I mean, the similarities between Jewish Zionism and African Zionism is that they have in common the fact that they both stem from a historical people who do not have a homeland, the people that are scattered all over the world. So I think the term diaspora first developed in discussions about the Jewish people. So we are kind of very similar to them in the sense that we are historical people who are seeking for a land, who are scattered across the world, and who have been persecuted in many different parts of the world.
Okay, this is interesting. Because there are some who would say, yes, of course, we know about the Jewish people being persecuted, but also there is this connection, which is not necessarily just Rastas who would embrace this connection with, this notion of being, dispersed, if you like, from their homeland. But there are many indigenous African groupings that we would recognize today on the continent who would also, trace their historical origins, back to a place that, today we would call Israel, or certainly that whole region. So this is quite interesting. And I'm just wondering if at any point on your travels, in terms of your philosophy and how you relate to Rasta, there has been that crossing over. Yeah, between indigenous African groups, for instance, the Lemba of Southern Africa, some of the Ashanti peoples. There are many similar traditions that Jewish people keep today that many of these, ethnicities and nationalities, if you like, who have been living on the continent for centuries and centuries and centuries also keep. So I'm wondering if at any point there could have been this crossover in your estimation.
Within my estimation, I wouldn't think so. I think that what we as an African people have tried to do, we've tried to sew ourselves into another people's story, and at the expense of our own. So Rasta is really about us trying to get focus and to start to tell the story of those people of African descent that exist in the Western world. What have been the trials and tribulations that they have been through? I mean, the Bible may talk about Moses, but we don't necessarily need a Moses because we have a Toussaint Louverture, or we have a Marcus Garvey, and we don't necessarily need a Jesus because we have a Martin Luther King or a Malcolm X. So what I think that there's definitely a need for us to stop trying to sew ourselves into other people's story and understand the origins and our root within Africa.
All right. Okay. So what would you say then are the unifying principles of Rasta?
The unifying principles of Rasta. Well, the teachings of Rasta work to unify, in particular, those of African descent in the Western world and those on the continent of Africa. Rasta is a pan-African philosophy that calls upon African people to create a new identity, a new body politic beyond ethnicity and nationality, an identity that emphasizes the interconnectedness of African people and the collective self-interest in political, economic and cultural union. So we're arguing that this would be the best way forward for African people to rise in the world and become a superpower, to become a respected people. So Rasta argues that we are not Ghanaian, Ethiopian, Caribbean or black, but that we are an African. Rasta teaches a philosophy that emphasizes the cultural unity of Africa, which is, I suppose, rooted in the writings of Sheikh Anta Diop. We see Africa as an idea as much as a place. So Rasta are also committed to the ideals of collective security, human rights and global citizenship as espoused by TAFARI through his long and illustrious career. So Rasta at all levels basically work to bring about unity between all people. TAFARI McConnell once said that the mystics of the ages have taught us that we are all spiritual kinsmen. So Rasta in its very essence is a unifying philosophy which tries to unify African people. It tries to unify political states across the world, and it tries to unify various religious or spiritual groups in the spirit of TAFARI McConnell, who strive throughout his life to do these things.
Okay, that's I'm hearing that. I guess I'm still thinking of an earlier question, but I'll come back to it. So you've spoken about these principles. How then, or where would we find the teachings of Rasta in terms of the ethics? How would people, if they wanted to learn, is there a book? Is there a manual? Is there a code that people could go to?
Well, there's a number of books that people could go to. At this precise moment, as I think I mentioned the last time when we was on the show, Rasta has not been around as long as some of these other faiths. So we haven't had the same amount of time to develop our ideas and more succinctly to document our ideas. But the ethics of Rasta, as I stated earlier, is rooted in the ethics of the wise sages of the Nile Valley. So we read texts such as the teachings of Ptah-hotep. The teachings of Ptah-hotep is allegedly the oldest book in the world, the oldest ethical text in the world. When we document our faith, these will be the foundation texts of our declaration, and we practice keeping the principles of the 42 confessions of the ancient Kemetic tradition. And there's a whole load of various texts that have been written around that period of time, such as the Eloquent Peasant. But another important book for us would be the Selected Speeches of Haile Selassie, which is a book what's been basically put together with all of the most prominent speeches of TAFARI McConnell throughout his lifetime. So the Egyptian texts underpin the central ethics practiced by TAFARI McConnell, our God and our teacher. So in the words of TAFARI, we find a modern rebirth of the tradition of the ancients in the Nile Valley. In TAFARI, we find a personification of those ancient ethical teachings. So we walk in the ethical path of the conquering lion. So TAFARI, who inspires all. So TAFARI teaches us to defend human rights, strive for collective security, to strive for global citizenship, and to strive towards democracy and the practice of international law and the practice of ecological sustainability. So I suppose we could have one fundamental ethical teaching of the Rasta faith. It would be that the truth is that all life and all beings are interconnected. So we'd probably ask a question like, would you hurt yourself?
Good question. Would you hurt yourself? Unfortunately, too many of us are hurting ourselves, and many others like us. Okay, in case you have just tuned in, we are discussing what are the contributions of the Rasta movement to the ongoing cause of African liberation. Now, if you've been listening, you would have heard what our guest Tony Tafari Thomas, the chair of the Rastafari Council of Britain, has been saying. If you would like to text in or ask any questions yourself or make a comment on anything you've heard, then please feel free to do so. The number is 0208 180 2523 or 07961 573 883. Alternatively, you can text us on 07904 899 195. And of course, we would love you to email us, studio@voiceofafricaradio.com. And the questions that we're asking tonight are, what is the significance of Rastafari to Africa and African people today? Is Rastafari still elevating the consciousness of the African masses? is Rastafari an African diaspora alternative to Islam and Catholicism? And what do we have to do to secure the Creator's support in our continued liberation? Finally, we're asking, what role can the National African People's Parliament play in institutionalizing respect for African spiritual systems? So we are discussing Rastafari tonight within the context of African liberation and the journey in particular of many Africans in the diaspora, you know, who have re-established themselves and evolved Rastafari, if you like, as a liberation movement with its own liberation theology, because the liberation, again, is not only the physical liberation and the economic liberation, it's also the spiritual liberation, recognizing the spiritual bondage. And this has been a huge contribution of Rastafari. Well, we're going to continue speaking with Brother Tony, and hopefully we'll be able to get our next guest on very soon. Now, Brother Tony, tell us then about the Rastafarian concept of the Creator.
Well, I mean, I'd probably prefer us to use the term God rather than Creator.
Okay. God, yeah.
For we as Rasta, what we have tried to do is to bring the ideas about Jehovah or Allah, to bring them down to earth, down to a more humanistic level, and to try to move away from God in the sky, Duppy God, and all these types of conceptions. So when we talk about God, we consider the term God to be a title. And it is a title that are given to those people, those human beings who, through their life and through their character and through their works, we believe that they are worthy of praise. So this is an ancient African tradition, where, for example, in Kemet, the pharaoh was considered to be was given a term called Nater Najer, which is the good God, and individuals that were able to become successful in their life, who were able to become wise sages and enlightened, these people were also deified. So what you find with our philosophy is that our philosophy is a very down-to-earth philosophy that doesn't actually seek for a God to come down from the sky, or a God to solve our problems. And I think this is the very radical element of Rasta, that Rasta says that human beings have the ability to improve themselves, to take control of life and existence on the earth, to create a lifestyle where we don't need to create false creator gods in order to make us feel better about ourselves and about life. Rasta really tries to confront reality.
Okay, thanks for that. And how then would you say this is, been part of the process of African liberation? How would you connect that to today, and in particular our main topic?
I think one of the key things within the whole concept of African liberation was about us collecting all of the data and information about the great civilizations that had been run by people of African descent. When we look at Europe, for example, we find that they had a period what they called the Renaissance. And during the Renaissance period, what they done is they looked around for any other people that or looked like them, and they created a concept of what they called the Western civilization. So they included Greek texts, and they included Roman texts and Greek and Roman ideas into the modern development, the modern intellectual development of this place called Europe. So we as Rasta, we are also instigating, and we have instigated this same type of process, which has led to many people starting to find out more about the ancient traditions of Africa, to find out more about their roots and start to develop a new intellectual idea of what it is to be an African. Perhaps the most important contribution that Rasta has made to African liberation is the attempt to move us away from religious faiths which have been forced upon us by people from different parts of the world, or people from different cultural experiences. And Rasta is seeking to make African people enlightened. And this is what we see with Tafari Makonnen. We see a man who was enlightened, and he's so enlightened that is why he's able to be given the title of God. So in many ways, we are trying to move people away from the religious mumbo jumbo that has characterized, no disrespect, maybe Christianity or Judaism, ideas about a jealous God, a God coming down to speak with human beings. We are kind of moving beyond that level and becoming more and more realistic. I remember Bob Marley said in one of his songs, regarding the palace so majestic, regarding the palace so realistic. And it says, if you know what life is worth, you would seek for yours on earth. So in that sense, Rasta is a non-transcendental philosophy, and we think that this is its greatest contribution to African liberation is to get our heads from out of the clouds.
Thank you. Africa Unite. Of course, we're talking about African liberation. We are discussing what are the contributions of the Rasta movement to the ongoing cause of African liberation. And we have been speaking with Tony TAFARI Thomas. We were trying to connect with our brother Yasser Safari. So Yasser, if you're listening, we have been trying to connect with you, and hopefully we will get to do so. But we also have brother Blessed BARAK in the studio with us, and he's going to come in on the conversation to share some more information. And of course, we are going to be opening the phone lines probably in about 5 minutes' time. The questions we're asking is, what is the significance of Rastafari to Africa and African people today? Is Rastafari still elevating the consciousness of the African masses? Is Rastafari an African diaspora alternative to Islam and Catholicism? What do we have to do to secure God's or the Creator's support in our continued liberation, however we understand God? And finally, what role can the National African People's Parliament play in institutionalising respect for African spiritual systems? Or you can give us a text on 07904 899 195. But we're not going to be opening the phone lines for about another 5 minutes. I have a text here from Brother Kwame, and he says, I want to big up our Rastafarian families in this earth. Their strength and abilities are so exceptional, because Africans are the original beings of our kingdoms from Dahomey to the Congo. Ja Rastafari, my Rasta brothers and sisters. Thank you so much, Brother Kwame in E15. I'm going to come to you next, Blessed BARAK. And it'd be good if you can just share with us your thoughts on how Rasta has contributed to the ongoing cause of African liberation. Of course, building on what Brother Tony has been saying around the spiritual reorientation and foundations that Rasta has, brought about.
Well, tonight still and greetings to all of your listeners, them sister Ekwa. You don't know, Blessed BARAK in the house. Big up Tony TAFARI, the reason them well I. Well, you know, Rastafari is for sure a liberation movement. I mean, one of the key things I can show the eye them as well, is if you look at the liberty of Rastafari, you know what I mean? What's keeping us down is global capitalism, slowing the down pressure. And you see the way of life of a Rastafari, the discipline, more or less, him not eat into the fast food industry. Him not wear the tight up things them, where them are wear, and the word of fashion where everyone are run for. So, Steve Biko use not buying from them as a great tool for make, political powers listen. Because if we want to have a voice within the movement, you hit them where it hurts in the pocket. It's not about reeling up with mouth and talking a word about this and that. It's about straight reality. And if you not buy from them, you suck off them life. Them can't get fi oppress you, And the Rastaman daily life is to wake up in the morning and more or less dodge these traps of anything we can draw you into this web of consumerism and wastage, and it's helping to oppress I and I brothers and sisters them all over the world. So if I and I say, for example, I support certain industries and certain, I'm also killing I and I brothers them in Africa. So there has to be the consciousness, the awareness of within I and I mind as a Rastafari go far and wide, just beyond I and I one physical being. The Rastafari, him look towards, we burn certain things, we not deal with certain leathers and, certain things. So you can see very clearly that there's many aspects, just even in the way how the Rastafari live, is already a key to the liberation of I and I people. And you mentioned originally as well about African Zion, of course, is Rasta philosophy, so repatriation with skills, intelligence, cause Rastafari is moving to a stage of higher intelligence now, where, we develop our understanding of many things, science, skills, trade. So repatriation, and our I and I move towards reparation. We bring in a lot of skills and knowledge, and understanding towards Africa, in order to development. We don't want some little, as well as, food. Yeah, you can't start a revolution without food. And one of the Rastafari first trade, the first thing we do is come to plant food. So I and I come to plant the food, and we come with the intelligence to build enough steel structure and, whatever we need towards, and the Rastafari is bumper in intuition and common sense. So it's also, you have to be able to understand the situation you're in any different parts of Africa. We can intuit and understand what I and I should be doing right now in this time. The Hebrew and Jewish connection into Rastafari, if you look at, words, if you look at that original word for Hebrew, if you read it from left to right and take if you understand Hebrew, you'd see it say Yoruba, it's the Ogan people. So I and I connected in any way you want to take it to, more or less everywhere in Africa. Give thanks to life.
Okay, that's very useful to hear about those kind of global connections. Now, would you say, I think Brother Tony TAFARI has already said it, but I'm going to ask you about it. This is a diaspora, if you like, movement. Do you feel that, and we know that there are many Rastas who are on the continent of Africa who, were born on the continent, but do you see Rasta as being able to liberate, the majority of the African masses on the continent? Is this a liberty that can, if I'm thinking about rural folk, in rural areas, is this something that you feel that they can embrace, or is it particularly young men or young women who have had a westernized upbringing that would be more likely to embrace Rastafari?
Well, Rastafari did develop in the West, but with its, it's an inbound concept, but it bears so many similarities towards ancient Kemet, Kush, the whole Nile Valley civilization. And it bears so many similarities towards, traditional African. Like, for example, Rastafari will find himself by the water, by the river. That's like a mommy water thing already. Rastafari would, have the drumming. Every single tradition in Africa, beat the drum. So, if we focus on our similarities, with each other, then also this will help to bridge all for the unity. I know many people of the older ages, might be in Africa that say, they have a little few things about Rasta. And, Rasta didn't grow up. So enough of Rasta didn't grow up on the continent, and they might have certain, thoughts which the ancients within Africa might feel, have something to say about it. Well, Rasta is very good at reasoning, so we're ready for reason with any ones who have specific things where they might think that, might be hard to gel and link with Rastafari on the continent. But on a whole, generally, we have a lot more similarities and ways of uniting, with the old, with the young. Especially the young love way. Because, we still are born Babylon, and we still, represent Africa. We still look out for the youths. The youth, them trust we a lot, and we have a lot of respect out there from the youths. And also this put a lot of responsibility on us also to make sure that we present the thing in a way where the youths can overstand it and also be approachable to the youth as normal. So we have to really keep the young keep connecting with them.
Thank you so much. We're speaking with Blessed Barak and Tony TAFARI Thomas from the Rastafari Council of Britain. And our topic is, what are the contributions of the Rasta movement to the ongoing cause of African liberation? Well, we'd love to hear from you. We would like to know how you have understood, and many of those of you who were influenced by Rasta, then why don't you give us a call? Join in this conversation. How did Rasta help you develop your African consciousness, whether on the continent or here in the diaspora? We're also asking, what is the significance of Rasta to Africa and African people today? And is Rasta still elevating the consciousness of the African masses? Is Rastafari an African diaspora alternative to Islam and Catholicism? And what do we do, or what do we have to do, I should say, to secure God's or the Creator's support in our continued liberation? And what role can the National African People's Parliament play in institutionalising respect for African spiritual systems? The number to call us or text us on, in fact the text number is 07904 899 195, and the number if you'd like to call into the show is 07961 573 883. Let me repeat those numbers: 07961 573 883, or text us on 07904 899 195. And of course, for those of you listening online, why don't you send us an email? studio@voiceofafricaradio.com. We'd like to know how you connect to Rasta. What do you know about Rasta, apart from reggae music? But if that's your entry point, then still call in. Be interesting to hear from some of our listeners what you think about our conversation this evening, and what contributions you feel that the Rasta movement has made and is making, or not. If that is the case, and if that's what you think, call in and have a conversation with us. Our guests would love to dialogue with you. So we're discussing what are the contributions of the Rasta movement to the ongoing cause of African liberation. Okay, I'm going to come back to our brothers in the studio, Blessed Barak and Tony TAFARI Thomas. Just picking up then on this whole question of Rasta and what it means today. I mean, it's been mentioned about this struggle against capitalism and the various forms of oppression or downpression, as I guess you would say, that are still impacting on people. You know, there has been some critiques, if you like, levelled at Rasta. Certainly, I think in between the last show and this show, people who are listening to it and who I've had a dialogue with, you know, one of the views that came out very strongly from some people, just a few people, was that Rasta has almost lost its groundings, its foundation, and that revolutionary spirit that many people identified it with, say, in the 70s and the 80s. I mean, how would you counter that? What would you say to those people who kind of feel that Rasta has kind of dissipated into, you know, various different directions as opposed to having that kind of revolutionary potential anymore? What would you say to those people?
Well, you know, Rasta has always been for African people, you know, and it was developed for African people, and it is developing for the benefit of African people. You know, despite what, you know, and, you know, as well, you know, it's always, you know, easy for someone to, you know, find, you know, the crew Rasta is so highly respected, you know, and so a lot is expected from Rastafari. So the slightest little form of look like Rasta is compromising on a whole, or even the one and two that might stray, and, you know, the creation of the rent-a-dread in Jamaica and around the world, and a few things, you know, and the European or the capitalists, you know, have, you know, would help to highlight these things as well, you know. And I mean, you know, so a few things have contribute to why why you might get people thinking in that way. But Rastafari is still on the firm mission. The higher initiates and the Rasta devotees are always on the high mission. I mean, and we will always keep on that mission. So I think that, and just by our way of life alone, as I was saying earlier, is a help towards, you know, the liberation of African people, you know, because one person you can count on to not buy into every single thing that is in the West is the Rasta, you know. So already we have help just by I and I liberty. And I mean, the one and few things them that are that might be niggling, you know, within the new formation of Rastafari now, which, you know, all the Rastafari elders ask for, like Martin Maplana asked for the structuring and the formation of Rastafari, which is what we're doing here in the Rastafari Council of Britain and the Rastafari Global Council, you know, is to make Rasta more overstandable to one and all, and also lay the foundations of the orders of Rastafari, you know, for all to be able to more or less move forward in a more collective manner, so that we don't have any more spillages which may, taint the honorable name of Rastafari Haile Selassie I the First. And, you know, because we are trying to emulate and embody the teachings of His Majesty in every way. So anything you see that deviate from liberation of Africa and the uniting of Africa, yes, you know, yes. And, you know, it's a big thing when a Rasta do something which the African people don't like. And I think the African people should keep burning your fire, keep looking on Rasta with a keen eye, and anything that you see which is not of the origin, then you can blaze, you know, so that we keep us strong to and make we know that people is watching us and expecting a lot from us.
Thank you so much, brother.
Well, I would say that Rasta continues to be a revolutionary force. We find this in particular within the music industry. Within the Jamaica music industry, people like Anthony B, people like Sister Kalanji, people like Cape, and these guys have been
hold the line, caller.
moral stalwarts within our community, and we've seen a phenomenon of Bobo Shanti rise up in the 1990s and in the new millennium. So Rasta is still doing lots of great works, and it is still a prominent voice within the African community.
Thank you, Brother Tony. Okay, greetings. We have a caller on the line. Greetings, caller. You're live on Voice of Africa Radio. Who's calling and where you calling from?
Greetings, Sister Ekwa. This is Ayo Badayo calling from Central London.
Okay, greetings, Brother Ayo. Good to hear you on Voice of Africa Radio.
So I've been listening to the show, and I just want to make my little contribution.
Go ahead. We're listening to you.
Yeah, first thing I want to say is the fact that, the Rasta movement is a very, very important movement. I mean, I grew up in Nigeria, and most of my history lessons were not taught to me in class. There were things I actually learned from reggae music. And, I was well tutored in that, because, even till now, I have discussions with people, and people always ask me, did you study history? No, it was Rasta music that taught me that. The other thing is the solidarity, the Rasta solidarity. The fact that, I remember when I came back to this country in 87, I think the second day in this country, I was permanent, but I went back when I was 5. I was living in New Cross, and I remember seeing this Rasta, this is my second day in the country, and, the bride just, spoke greetings, and I said greetings back, and I said, where are you from? I said, Nigeria, and the way the brother embraced me, gave me his number. If I have any problem, I should give him a call, and these are the positive things that, the Rasta movement have contributed to our society.
Okay.
And,
Now, Brother Ayo, and what would you say the contribution is now?
I think in terms of, I think the most important one at the moment is that solidarity thing. Rasta see one another, say one love, touching of the heart, But I think that is still very strong. I think in terms of focus, one thing I'll say, it might be controversial, is the fact that even though a lot of Rastas, say one love, it seems the love is not reserved for the African woman anymore.
Goodness. Oh, my goodness.
There's a saying that charity begins at home. The whole African Liberation thing is about building a nation. And if you can't build nations with your own woman, then, I'm not saying people cannot date whoever they want to date, but, it's so obvious that, most Rastas, don't necessarily want to check their own women.
Are you talking about Rastas in this country, Brother Ayo? Yes?
Those are the ones I know.
Okay. All right. Well,
but that's just a minor thing. Overall, the Rasta movement is still very important, and I think the Rasta movement really have to start getting into what I would call well-organized study of who we are, well-organized plan of where we're supposed to be going.
We hear you. Okay, thank you so much for your contribution, Brother Ayo, and I'm going to...
Very, very good.
Okay, I'm going to let our brothers make a comment in response to what you said. Keep listening. Thank you so much. Okay, do you want to comment on anything Brother Ayo was saying? He did pick up on a point that you did touch on, Blessed Barak, about, some people who was supposedly a Rasta and acting in a particular way, and some of the renter dreads. It's not quite the same thing, but certainly that point that's been made about where is the loyalty, where is the focus of many of the Rasta brethren today? Is it still on African emancipation and repatriation, or is it on the women of supposedly the oppressor nation?
Well, the Rastafari thing, the battle is not only for the strong, nor the race for the swift, but is who can endure Rastafari liberty, right to the full liberation of Africa. None is free until all is free. So Rastafari will stand firm, It's very few Rasta who would give away is one woman, And it is what it is. And some people get fall along the wayside due to sufferation or many other reasons. They have a lot of reasons why they do these things. But at the same time, I want to make them know that, African people are
Hold
watching
the line,
you.
caller.
So please be wise.
Thank you so much. Greetings, caller. You're live on Voice of Africa Radio. Who's calling and where you calling from?
Greetings, sister. Is I am blessed Barak Virgin. I am a Barak,
Greetings to you, brother.
Greetings. With the Rastafari appeal to non-Africans, I realize Rastafari came with a message for the world, and it was for all people. He came to unify the world, and yet some of I never hear the words or the teachings of His Majesty, or we were in the position to effect certain changes. So he appealed to non-African. Naya being Gada. Rastaman is supposed to know that. We don't have to disclose everything, but Naya being have been even effective in England during the times of the war, Italy, Abyssinian war. Yeah. Naya being of European people using strategies, Yeah. His Majesty, I'm speaking of Haile Selassie, of amongst him. Because, I talk about humanity and unity and culture. Haile Selassie speaks about truth. And for non-African, it's a way of consciousness expansion. It's truth and right we are dealing with. Universal value. And it's not any secret anymore. A lot of non-African people see that Africans have been exploited and been mistreated. And some of them feel that the only way they can recompense or reconciliate or whatever the word may be is by, joining with I, which is the revolutionary movement, which is Rastafari. From a long time, Rastafari has been the revolutionary movement in Africa, So you say we started in the West in Jamaica, but as the Blessed says, from Asian Africa and I in Jamaica, learn of the traditions and learn of His Imperial Majesty reign. And so we give a rally around it, and find out that the whole world have to rally around Rastafari.
Thank you so much, my brother, for your contribution. I'm going to come back to our brothers in the studio because we're literally almost out of time, actually. The time has gone by really, really quickly. I think it'd be good, brother Tony, to just hear some concluding comments in particular, just so that we can get a better sense of where we're at. What is it you think people most need to know and understand about Rastafari today?
Well, today I think the most important thing for people to understand would be the roots of Rasta. Where did this tradition originate from? So this is a tradition that could perhaps go back 10,000 years, and people need to really read up about this and to begin to understand more exactly what the Rasta philosophy is within an African-centered context.
Okay, thank you so much. And some concluding comments from yourself, Blessed Barak?
Well, Rastafari, I say one love, one heart, and to all people across the earth, I know a lot of other races and many people across the world, from all different backgrounds still respect Rastafari as well as we continue to do I works in Africa. And respect to all them who respect Rastafari from wherever in the globe you is, because it's better to have more people who respect and honor we, and choose with lifestyle off of the shelf, when I find some kind of help and benefit within our lifestyle. So we big up all of the people them of all races and continue to watch and support, if you want, the movement as Rastafari move towards the liberation of Africa. And Africans everywhere in the world, give thanks for the respect and give thanks for the honor. you know, and give thanks for the vibes and the energy that you give unto Rastafari, and look out for more to come. You know, someone mentioned about the Rastafari being organized and a bit more structured. Well, this is what's happening right now. So look forward to see a lot more understanding of Rastafari, you know, and documentaries and books. So more love to you all, and big up to Voice of Africa Radio. 100% of love. Boom. Rastafari.
Thank you. Oh, we had another caller who's been holding on a long time, so I am going to take this caller if they're going to be brief. Greetings, caller. You're live on Voice of Africa Radio. Who are you and where are you calling from?
Greetings, Sister Edward. This is Simba.
Greetings, Brother Simba. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and I'm in South London at the moment.
Hey, great to hear you. First time you've called in on my show. But there's a first time for everything.
I'm always listening, but you know, like, Rasta is close by in our heart, you know.
What would you like to say, Brother Simba?
What I would like to say that a lot of people know very obviously about Rastafarians working in the music industry, yeah, and know very much about the Rastafari message through music. Brother Aya was talking about solidarity, and you know, Brother Barak has made very good comments about, you know, who the Rastaman is and what the Rastaman is really seeking for, you know. But I think in this modern time, what Rastafari is really doing, the real serious Rastaman is really doing, is focusing on repatriation, you know. And a lot of people are not really aware because they say, oh, a lot of people say, oh, Rasta's still talking about wanting to go to Africa. But they're not really realizing how many Rasta have actually left the Caribbean, the Americas, Britain, and moved forward, you know, to Africa, and are now teaching in schools, you know, doing different projects in different industries, you know, which is all part of the liberation struggle as well. Because I believe that really and truly, a lot of things need to be done hands-on as well, you know.
Very, very fair point to make as well, and I think that's key and a good point to close us out on this whole issue of repatriation, which is very much part of the African liberation struggle, and it is about us returning ourselves to our homeland, to our motherland. Thank you so much for calling in, African Simba.
No problem. Give thanks.
Thanks. Oh my goodness, the show went so quickly, and I think I have to bring the show to a close. But before I do that, I just need to acknowledge these texts from Brother Kwame. He says the ideologies of Rastafarianism inspires our people. Definitely Robert Nesta Marley, Winston Rodney, Peter Tosh, etc. It is the inspiration of Haile Selassie and Marcus Garvey. Africans are the original Rastafaris, and you know it, man. Yeah, okay, Brother Kwame, thank you. And I think there's another one that we have here. He says, my brothers and sisters of our Rastafari families, you don't have to please anyone. You keep it up. Well, I think enough said. And we are literally out of time. Closing out, I'd just like to recommend one book to you. There's probably many more. This is a book called Overstanding Rastafari, Jamaica's Gift to the World by Yassas Afari. And I'd like to get our guests, they were Brother Tony, Tafari Thomas and Blessed Barak, to just let us know how they can find out more about the Rastafari Council of Britain and contact yourselves in particular.
Well, the Rastafari Council of Britain, all you have to do is just type that in your Google, and you can find us on the Rastafari Council of Britain.org.uk, you know. And, you know, I mean, we're on the Facebook as well. you know, where you can find certain discussions going on regarding Rastafari. But mainly, a lot of the work of Rastafari Council of Britain right now is happening on the internal and political and diplomatic level. You know, we make change in employment laws. You know, we're gaining rights. We're dealing with Rastafari human rights and standing, you know, which will help in I repatriation as well. You know, because, you know, when you repatriate, you want to know, say, you know, all of Rastafari is recognized throughout the whole world, and all the systems, they know Rastafari and they know how to deal with us, and they know what we deal with, just like any other religion. So equal rights and justice. So we're pretty busy. But if you're serious right now, we're recruiting a lot. We want all of the Rastafari to be organized and centralized. So link us up. Just type in Rastafari Council of Britain. Blessed love. Anna.
Thank you. Blessed love. Okay, brothers and sisters, we are right out of time. We've gone slightly over. But of course, it was worth it because we had to conclude our conversation. I'd like to thank our special guest contributors. They were Tony TAFARI Thomas and Blessed Barak. And also, I'm going to acknowledge Brother Yasser Safari, who was scheduled to be with us. So hopefully we will be speaking with him very, very soon, even though that did not happen this evening. But he was with us in spirit. You have been listening to Africa Speaks with Sister Ekua on Voice of Africa Radio. Until next week, this is me, Sister Ekua, saying, remember that the struggle for the restoration of our peoples and nationhood continues. To all of the elders, wherever you may be and in whatever form that you may be found, may I take this opportunity on behalf of all your sons and daughters to assure you that we will not allow our oppressors to write the last chapter of our history. Arise, you mighty sons and daughters of Pan-Africa. Victory is certain. We are the ones that we have been waiting for, and we will write the final chapter of the book that shall forever remain open.
This is Voice of Africa Radio, 94 FM.
Do you need to advertise your business or promote your event? Are you looking for a DJ or photo and audio production or web event management, media training, photo and audio?